In the European theater of World War II, capturing a high-ranking German officer was often a bizarre, infuriating experience for the American military. The men who commanded the Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS were not just soldiers, they were the products of a deeply ingrained aristocratic military caste system. They viewed war as a grand European chess match. Even as their armies were being obliterated, their cities burned, and their supply lines cut, these men maintained a staggering, almost delusional level of arrogance. When captured by American forces, German generals frequently refused to speak to anyone below their own rank. They would demand to be quartered in luxury chateaus. They would complain bitterly that the Americans didn't know how to fight a proper war, to whining that the U.S. Army relied too heavily on artillery and air power rather than honorable infantry tactics. They tried to use their cold, stoic Prussian bearing to intimidate their American interrogators, looking down their noses at the citizen soldiers of the United States as if they were a mob of uncultured peasants. Most American commanders, adhering strictly to the Geneva Conventions and a sense of gentlemanly conduct, tolerated this theatrical arrogance. General George S. Patton did not. Patton understood something that many of his contemporaries did not. Warfare is deeply psychological. He knew that the German belief in their own innate superiority was the glue holding their crumbling army together. If you wanted to defeat them permanently, you couldn't just destroy their tanks. You had to destroy their ego. Yet when Patton took command of the U.S. Third Army, he deliberately crafted a persona designed to terrify his enemies. He wasn't just a general, he was a carefully constructed avatar of war. He wore a heavily lacquered, high-gloss M1 helmet with oversized, gleaming general's stars. He carried a riding crop. And most famously, he wore a pair of custom ivory-handled revolvers, a Colt .45 and a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum, strapped to his waist like a 19th century gunfighter. Patton designed his headquarters not just as a command post, but as an intimidation chamber. And when an arrogant German commander was brought before him, Patton knew exactly how to spring the trap. As the Third Army smashed its way across France and into Germany, thousands of Axis prisoners fell into Patton's hands, including high-ranking panzer commanders and fanatical SS officers. During one such documented interrogation, a captured German general was brought into Patton's headquarters. The German officer was furious. He was immaculate in his tailored uniform, his chest heavy with medals. He marched into the room with his spine perfectly straight, expecting Patton to stand, offer a crisp salute, and perhaps pour him a glass of sherry to discuss the fortunes of war. Instead, the German found himself standing in a massive, eerily quiet room. Patton was seated behind a large desk. He did not stand up. He did not salute. Beside him sat his white bull terrier, Willie, who was trained to aggressively growl at the sight of German uniforms. The German officer, attempting to seize control of the room and reassert his dominance, immediately began to bark complaints. He haughtily criticized the barbaric American tactic of fighting at night. He complained about his accommodations. He demanded to be treated with the dignity owed to a senior officer of the Third Reich, attempting to stare Patton down with cold, calculating Prussian authority. He was waiting for the American to flinch. He was waiting for an apology. Patton let the German officer finish his arrogant tirade. He stared back at him, his face an unreadable mask beneath the gleaming rim of his helmet. Then, Patton slowly stood up. He didn't offer a gentlemanly rebuttal. He didn't cite the Geneva Conventions. Instead, Patton reached down to his right hip. In one fluid, practiced motion, he unholstered his massive ivory-handled .357 Magnum. Patton raised the heavy weapon in the air and then violently slammed it down onto the wooden desk with a deafening crack that echoed through the room. The German officer physically jumped, his stoic demeanor instantly shattering. Patton then leaned across the desk, his face inches from the German's, and unleashed a torrent of pure, high-pitched, profane American fury. Patton told the German exactly what he thought of his master race. He informed the captive commander that his army was being annihilated, that his tactics were garbage, and that the only reason he was breathing American air was because Patton generously allowed it. He pointed to the gun on the desk and made it abundantly clear. You are not a guest. You are not a peer. You are a defeated prisoner of the United States Army. And if you ever open your mouth to demand a privilege in this headquarters again, I will personally shoot you where you stand. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The German officer, who had marched into the room expecting to intellectually spar with a sympathetic aristocrat, suddenly realized he was locked in a room with a heavily armed, bloodthirsty madman who genuinely looked as though he wanted to pull the trigger. The cold Prussian arrogance completely evaporated. The German officer snapped his mouth shut. The color drained from his face, and his posture collapsed. He had tried to play a psychological game of chess, and Patton had responded by flipping the board and pulling a gun. The German was quickly and quietly escorted out of the room, completely broken, entirely compliant, and terrified of the commander of the Third Army. George S. Patton was a deeply flawed, highly controversial figure who frequently clashed with his own superiors. But when it came to understanding the mind of his enemy, he was an unmatched genius. The German military machine was built on the myth of absolute, unshakable superiority. They believed that no one could match their discipline, their heritage, or their resolve. When they tried to use that myth to intimidate their captors, Patton refused to play along. He knew that you cannot reason with a bully, and you cannot negotiate with a fanatic. The only language the arrogant elite of the Third Reich truly understood was overwhelming, uncompromising force. By slamming his revolver on the desk, Patton didn't just silence one arrogant officer. He physically demonstrated the reality of the Second World War. The era of the aristocratic Prussian warlord was over. The era of the American superpower had violently arrived.